Welcome. In this section on macroeconomics, we would discuss national income accounting. To begin with, what we would cover in this lecture is the very fundamentals about national income. When we would be understanding national income, we would understand the methods to calculate it. So there are three important methods that we would discuss: product method, expenditure method, and income method. We would also focus on what is GDP deflator, consumer price index, and wholesale price index. To begin with, if we talk about Adam Smith, an inquiry into the nature and the cause of natural wealth. So the basic thing that actually had Adam Smith the inquisitiveness to study about economics was what generates wealth, what actually makes a country rich, what actually makes a country poor. There are resource rich regions, for example, Africa, Latin America, but on the other hand, they are one of the poorest nations. Why is it so? The reason is the richest nations have very scarce natural wealth, but on the other hand, the poor nations, which are extremely rich in natural resources, are still poor. That means when we focus on economic wealth, it's not only about possessing a resource, but it is more about how can you actually produce from that resource, how can you productively generate that resource or make that resource a viable option and generate income or wealth from that resource. So with this idea, the whole basis of Adam Smith's economics was laid down. Now, whenever we talk about the economic scenario, it's a combination of things. For example, I ask you, you prepared meals at home and had it. You prepared tea at home and drank it. Do you call this as an economic process? No. But if we talk about a definition of economics, we say that we combine natural energies, man-made energies to generate certain kind of social technological structure which creates a production. So in this case, you are producing your meals, you are producing your tea. But it's not exactly economics. Why? Because it is not sold to the customers. If the same meals that you are processing at home, you are delivering it to your next door neighbor and charging for it, then it would come under the ambit of economics. Why? Because it is being sold to the customer. It's not just you are gifting it to your neighbor, but you are actually selling it for money to your neighbor. And in that case, it would be turning out to be an economic aspect. So, whenever we talk about any commodity, the most important thing is we focus on the final product, not the intermediate products. When I mean intermediate products, what does that mean? Let's say there is wheat which is grown in the farm. Now this wheat goes to the flour machine. So flour machine would actually create the flour, and that flour would be used to process the bread. Now, when I am charging for a bread, I cannot double charge for everything. I cannot charge for wheat twice. The flour machine, if it has charged for wheat, then the cost that I am getting the flour would be the final cost. I cannot include the cost of wheat again on top of it, right? So that means we are focusing only on the final item which is produced, and it incorporates all intermediate goods. The prices of that would be incorporated, and finally what is the final product would be released, and that would be called as the final product. The remaining all things, the flour mill, the flour being obtained from the flour mill, would be what? Those would be the intermediate product. When I am looking for a bread, a ready-made bread. Now, when we talk about economic terms, it's important to understand that we are talking about the final good. So when I am saying meals, it's simply the cooked meals, the ready meals, which are processed and ready for sales. Now, final goods can again be classified into two types. It can be a consumption good, it can be a capital good. How do we differentiate? The concept is very simple. Consumer goods are those goods which are used by consumers. For example, anything pertaining to food, clothing, recreation are all under the consumer goods. Fast moving consumer goods, FMCGs that we call, for example, soap, toothpaste, all of those would be fast moving consumer goods required on a regular basis. The next is the capital good. Let's say I have a printing industry. So I install a printing machine. Now this would be a capital good. I would have certain tools, implements, and then the machinery. Now once I have a machinery, this machinery would undergo wear and tear. So wear and tear, repair of the machinery would always fall under capital. So whenever we talk about capital, with capital we associate another term. This term is known as depreciation. Now note, when we are talking about depreciation in accounting, we don't depreciate things all of the sudden. We depreciate a portion of it every year. For example, I purchase a car. Now, let's say I purchase a car for rupees 4 lakh. Now, I go to my CA, my chartered accountant, and say that I purchased a car. So, the chartered accountant would file a depreciation for the car, considering the average life of the car, let's say as 20 years. So, or 10 years, okay. So, let's assume that the age of the car is taken as 10 years. Now, when the age of the car is taken as 10 years, that means 1/10 of the price would be depreciated every year. It's not all of the sudden the whole amount that would go into depreciation would be taken into consideration in the very first year of the accounting. No. When we are depreciating, we depreciate it on a yearly basis. That means you would own this car, you would keep this car for 10 years. When it is new, the amount of depreciation is lost. When it is more old, you would have more wear and tear, more repairing. So the depreciation amount would increase as it grows older. So that whole calculation is taken into account while we are doing accountings, right? So depreciation is a very important component of accounting, a very, very important principle that you must keep into account. Now, capital goods can be maintained as a stock or flow. What is a stock or flow? Stock is keeping the inventory. Let's say you require books for your study, and let me say I am a stationery shop and I provide the books. Okay, so what I do is I keep a stock. Okay, 9th class, these books are required. 10th class, these books are required. On an average from my shop, let's say 500 students purchase the books every year. So probably I'll keep a stock of 500 books for each subject, for each class. But this year, for some case, only 200 students turned out to my shop. So what would happen? I would have a stock of 300 books which is still piling up with me. So probably that would be sold out in the next year, or I would have to bear the losses for the same, or I would have to return it to the company, get a new lot, whatsoever it takes. But that is the stock. Okay, so stock is defined at a particular point of time. So at this point of time, I can say I have a stock of 500 books. 1 month later, you come to me and ask me what's your stock. I would say I have a stock of only 300 books, 200 are sold. Okay, so that is at a definite point of time. Very, very important. The next is flow. Flow is what keeps going. You are getting something into the system. For example, let's say I have a printing machinery. I have a printing press and a printing machinery. Now, when I am printing, what is a constant inflow? Paper. So, constantly the paper would come in. The paper would be processed. The books would be published. And the books would be supplied out. So what is the constant inflow? Paper. So that is a flow, right? So that's the amount that is constantly being added to the system. Stock is for just a single point. Flow is a constant thing. Again, a very simple way to explain flow and stock. I have a tap in the house. Now, when the tap is open, what we call it? That would be a flow. But that tap is attached to a container. And that container is what? That container is the stock. So a very simple way to understand flow and stock, right? So under capital goods, we need to understand flow and stock. Extremely important. So far what we have did is we have understood that under economics we deal with final goods. However, there are intermediate goods as well, but in economic terms we focus only on final goods. These final goods can be further subdivided into consumption goods and capital goods. Capital goods could be classified as flow and stock. The next is, as I said, depreciation, that's the wear and tear, the regular maintenance, the repair which is required. So from the investment, whatever amount is depreciated is subtracted, and we call the remaining as net investment, right? So let's say I purchase a building now, or I purchase a house, right? The cost of the house was initially 20 lakhs. The depreciation was calculated around 2 lakhs. Now when I am trying to sell it, I would be selling it at least at 18 lakhs, and that would be the net investment, right? Upon it would be the profit, right? So net investment would include the gross investment minus any form of depreciations which are incurred to it. Now the next important thing is investment, another term we have introduced here. Investments can be again of two types. Investments can be physical investments or financial investments. Physical investments are those investments where you have physical assets which are taken into account, and financial investments are those investments where you have financial things that are taken into account, right? So those are another important two things. The next is the circular flow of income. Now before we understand circular flow of income, four terms that I would introduce. The first is wage. Wage is given to the labor. Interest is incurred onto the capital. Profit is incurred by the entrepreneur, and rent is incurred onto the resource. So I could have a building, I could have a machinery that I could give for rent. Okay, so four important terms: wages, interest, profit, and rent. These terms would not go away till the time you are studying economics, right? Now the circular flow of income is a pretty interesting phenomena. You have firms on one hand, households on other hand. These households act as labor in the firms. Now the firms produce something. So these households are the only people who would purchase it, right? So the households are spending and their money is going, and the money is received by whom? The money is received by firms. So this path is known as household to firm is the spending. We also call it as aggregate expenditure. Aggregate expenditure being received by the firms. On the other hand, the firm would make the payment to the labor as wages, okay, to the people from whom they have hired the equipment as rent. So all this would go as factor payment. So this factor payment would go as aggregate income to the household, right? So that is aggregate expenditure received by the firms and aggregate income going to the household. The aggregate income going to the household is through the factor payments, and the aggregate expenditure from the household to the firms is through the spending, right? Now the firms would be providing the goods and services to the households, and the households would also be providing the factor services to the firms. So I have marked it as A, B and C. Now this A, B and C is really interesting. What is this A, B and C? There are three methods that we would understand. So the first method that we would understand here is the expenditure method. We already said from household to firms you are spending, and this is the aggregate expenditure going to the firm. So when we said, when we are calculating income, three methods, so this would be the expenditure method. So this would be the first expenditure method. So the A is expenditure method. The B is from the firms, the goods and services are going to the households. So this is what? This is the products which are going. So we call it as the product method. The last is from the firms, the factor payments would be going to the households. Factor payments would be the aggregate incomes going to the household. So it is which method? It is the income method. So three methods that we would understand across this lecture. Just to summarize them again, those are expenditure method, product method, and income method. Expenditure method is from household to firms, the spendings that are done. Product method is the goods and services from firms going to the households, and income is the factor payment going from the firms to the household again. So three methods of calculation of income which we would understand in detail as we would proceed with this lecture, and this is the circular flow. Now note, this is where we are talking about aggregate. I cannot say that if my income is increased by X percentage, my expenditure would also increase by X percentage. But for an aggregate society, I can say that if income is increased by X percentage, the expenditure would increase by Y percentage, right? So it's not required that the same person whose income is increased would be spending proportionately in the same amount. It's not at all required. So that's one important thing. And the circular flow of income again says, as the income increases, what would happen? The spending would increase. As the spending would increase, firm would produce more. So more goods and services would go to the households. And at the same time, since firm would be receiving more money, they would hire more, so more factor payments would go, so more income going to the households, and these households would then spend more. So it is like a constant cycle that goes on, right? So if the income increases, the relative expenditure in the economy increases. This expenditure in the economy would boost the production, and more products would come out, more products being purchased because people now have higher paying capacity, and the cycle goes on. So we call this as a circular flow of income. In the next, we would understand the methods to calculate the expenditure method, the methods to calculate the income. So expenditure method, product method, and income method are the three important methods that we will discuss. Three ways to calculate the income. Now the first one is the product or the value added method. A very simple way to explain this method is, let's say in the economy there are only two players. One is the farmer, the other is a baker. Now farmer does not require any input except labor and gets an output of 100. So 100 is the revenue by the farmer. Now farmer, of this 100, 50 is supplied to the baker. So 50 is the input for the baker, and baker makes a revenue of 200. If I calculate it, including the double counting, I can say total revenue would be 100 plus 200, which is 300. But actually that's not the case, because from this 100, 50 has gone as an input to the baker. So it would be 100 plus 200 minus 50, because this 50 is counted twice with the farmer as well as the baker. So this becomes 250. So 250 would be my right answer in this case, and this would be based on the value addition method. As I mentioned, in the case of value addition, first of all, it's a flow variable, so it's constantly going in. The second important thing is we are removing the intermediate goods. Intermediate goods are not double counted. So that's another important thing that we must be acquainted with here. The next important thing is, whenever we are talking about stock, we focus on inventory. Now this inventory is what? Inventory is nothing but the production of the firm during the year minus the sales of the firm during an year would be the change in the inventory. So change in inventory would be nothing but production minus the production by the firm in a given year minus the sales by the firm in a given year, and that would be the change in the inventory. Now there are two things. When I am maintaining an inventory, it can have an unplanned accumulation of inventory. Why? Because I target to sell 1000 pieces and I believe that only 100 would be left. But surprisingly, 600 were left. So there is an unplanned accumulation of inventory, and there can also be unplanned decumulation of inventory. Decumulation of inventory would occur when you have 100 pieces, but suddenly you receive an order for 1200, so you run short of 200 pieces here. So there can be an unplanned accumulation of inventory, there can be an unplanned decumulation of inventory based on what actually you are trying to do. Now under the product method, I can simply say the gross value added would be equal to the summation of the gross value added over the time 1 to n for various items. So that would be GAV1 plus GVA2, gross value addition for 1, for 2, for 3, till gross value addition for nth item. And this would be explained simply as the sum total of the gross value addition of all firms in an economy. So this is firm 1, firm 2, firm n. So all the firms, the gross value added by all of the firms together would be the gross value addition of the firm. So this was the product method. The second method is the expenditure method. What is expenditure method? Expenditure method simply says that it would be equal to the calculation of the income would be equal to consumption expenditure plus investment expenditure plus government expenditure plus the revenue, export revenue. Now this export revenue X would be export minus import, or I can say this X bar could be revealed as X minus M. So I can write it as C plus I plus G plus X minus M, right? And that would be the expenditure method which is utilized. Now of all these, investment, which I am using here, is the most unstable parameter. Consumption, investment, government expenditure, exports minus imports. Of this, investment, as I said, is the most unstable parameters. The third one is the income method. Now income method includes wage plus profit plus interest payments plus rent. So it's wage, profit, interest payments and rent. Together, when we calculate, we come up with the income method. So these are some of the important methods. Now let's say there is firm A and firm B. The wages of the firm A and the profits of the firm A and B. So wages are, let's say, 20 and 60. Profit is 30 and 90. So for the wages, the total wages would be 80. The total profit would be 120, and the total amount generated through income method would be 200. As simple as that. So three methods of calculating income are here. Now coming on to the next thing, it's the Central Statistical Office. Now Central Statistical Office talks about GDP. GDP is the aggregate of goods and services produced within the country. Now when I say it is within the domestic region, that means if an Indian is working in, let's say, Saudi Arabia, right? That contribution of Indian working in South America would not be counted to GDP. Similarly, let's say there is a foreign company or a Korean Hyundai company that runs in India. The profit generated by that Korean Hyundai company in India would not be accounted for the GDP purpose, right? So neither this is accounted nor this is accounted. So GDP includes aggregate of the economic goods and services which are produced within the domestic boundaries of the country, right? And the statistical office reports GDP at two levels. It is GDP at factor cost and GDP at market price. Now note, when I am saying market price, what I am trying to include? I include the product, taxes, subsidies. At factor cost, I am only considering the price of the product received by the producer. So factor cost only includes the price of the product received by the producer. Market price includes what? It includes the taxes and the subsidies into it, right? So in 2005, it was believed that the GDP at factor cost can be well represented as what? The gross value added at the base price, right? And GDP at market price could be called as GDP. And this was the ruling given by Central Statistical Office in 2015, right? So now understand what is the most important thing that you need to understand here. When I say GAV at base price, okay, first of all, what is GAV? Gross value added, as I said, is the total output minus the intermediate, what we did in the product or the value method. So total output minus the intermediate consumption would be the gross value addition. Now what is gross value addition at base price? So gross value addition at base price is equal to gross domestic product or gross value addition, I can say, at factor cost plus the net production tax, right? The net production tax would include production tax minus production subsidy. So this is the gross value addition at base price. Now the next is the gross value addition at market price. Gross value addition at market price would be gross value addition at the base price plus the net product tax. What is product tax? Product tax, net product tax is nothing but product tax minus product subsidy. So that's how we understand the gross value addition. Now gross value addition is a parameter to represent what? To represent GDP, and therefore we understand that GDP at factor cost becomes important. Now as I said, the aggregate of goods and services produced within an economic boundary would be called as GDP. But as I mentioned, we forget to take into account the Indians who are working abroad and the foreign companies working in India. So for that, what we calculate is GNP. And GNP is GDP plus net factor income from abroad. And what is this net factor income from abroad? Net factor income from abroad is nothing but the factor income of the domestic workers working abroad, like Indians working in Saudi Arabia. So it is the net factor income of domestic people working abroad minus the factor income of foreign companies in or the rest of the world in domestic market. So basically Indians working in other countries minus other countries having their establishments in India, and that would be the net factor income from abroad. So to calculate GNP or the gross national product, we have GDP plus the net factor income from abroad. Now with this we calculate what? We calculate the GNP, gross national product, is equal to GDP plus net factor income from abroad. Now what is NNP? Net national product is equal to gross national product minus depreciation, right? Now this net national product can be of two types: net national product at market price and net national product at factor cost, right? When I say net national product at market price, it includes indirect taxes and the net national product at factor cost is equivalent to the national income, which is the net national product at market price minus indirect tax plus subsidies. Okay, so net national product at factor cost would be equal to the net national product at market price minus indirect tax plus subsidy. So what is this indirect tax plus subsidy? Indirect tax plus subsidy is the net indirect tax which is explained. So here we have understood what is GDP, what is GNP, what is NNP, NNP at market price and NNP at factor cost, which is equal to the national income. Now, what is personal income? Personal income is equal to the national income minus the undistributed profit. Undistributed profit is the profit not distributed among the factors of production. So we call it as undistributed profit minus the net interest payments by household minus corporate tax plus transfer of payment from government or firms, right? So that would be your personal income. Now if I want to ask you what is personal disposable income, that would be personal income which is already there minus the personal tax minus non-tax payments. So this non-tax payment would include what? This would include all kinds of fine. So this personal disposable income is a measure of aggregate household income and it actually explains how much person is willing to pay. So what is a personal income is important. Personal income is the national income, which is the net national product at factor cost minus undistributed profit, the profit which is not distributed by the factors of production, minus the interest payments by the household minus corporate tax plus the transfer of payment from the government or the firms. Now once we have this, we also understand what is the national disposable income. National disposable income or NDI is again important, and this is the net national product at market price plus other current transfers from the rest of the world. Other current transfers from the rest of the world. So this would include gift, aid or any other assistance, and this would be the national disposable income, the disposable income that a nation has, similar to a personal disposable income that a household or a family has. Now this actually is the maximum amount of goods and services which are available for disposable income. The next is private income. What is private income? Private income is nothing but the factor income from the net domestic product occurring in the private sector. So the net domestic product in private sector plus national debt interest plus net factor income from abroad plus current transfers from government and other current transfers from the world, from rest of the world. So that would make the private income category. Now since we have gone through all of this, if I want to give you a quick recap of all the formulas, what I can say is you already know market price and factor cost. Market price includes the tax and the subsidies, the product tax and the subsidies. Factor cost includes the price of the product received by the producer. So net national product at factor cost would be equal to the net national product at market price minus the net product tax minus net production tax. Clear? Then the next is net national product at market price is equal to net domestic product at market price plus the national factor income from abroad, and the net national product at market price would also be equal to the gross national product at market price minus depreciation. So all these are some of the formulas which can be commonly used. The next is, what is the difference between a real GDP and a nominal GDP? So real GDP is at constant price and nominal GDP is at current price, right? So let's say year 2000 and 2001. The number of units are 100. The rate is 10 and 15, right? So my production is increased in 2011. Now for the nominal GDP, what is my rate at the current price? So current amount minus the multiplied by the current price. So 110 multiplied by 15, which is 1650, would be my nominal GDP. And my real GDP would be how much? My current production multiplied by the base year price, which is 2000 as the base year. So 110 into 10, which is 1100 as the real GDP. Now I can calculate how much is the GDP deflator. GDP deflator is nominal by real, that is 1650 divided by 1100, which makes it 1.5 times. So my GDP deflator in this case is 1.5 times, and it represents nominal GDP by real GDP. Nominal GDP indicates what? It indicates at the current price. Real GDP indicates at the constant price. That means if I consider 2000 as the base year, so my price would be for the year 2000 that I have taken. Okay, so I have taken 10 as the price here. However, at a normal GDP, I take the current production and the current price. But in the case of real GDP, I take the current production but the base price. And therefore, GDP deflator is one good indicator. Besides this, there are two important indicators. Those are the consumer price index and the wholesale price index. And then we would talk about three important factors that affect GDP and welfare. So that would be the basis for this lecture. But so far what we have understood is the three methods of income calculation: product method or value added method, expenditure method, and income method. And then we have talked about the GDP, GNP. GNP is nothing but the net factor income from abroad added to it, and then GNP minus depreciation as NNP, both at factor cost and market cost. Factor cost and market price is important. And then we have focused on what is real GDP, nominal GDP, and how to. So far we have covered what is GDP deflator. Now besides GDP deflator, as we mentioned, there are two important indicators. What are those? One is the consumer price index, the other is the wholesale price index. As the name suggests, wholesale price index talks about the commodities which are purchased in wholesale or bulk. In India, it is known as WPI or wholesale price index. In United States, this is known as producer price index or PPI. Now, what is consumer price index? Consumer price index is the index of the price of commodities brought by the consumers. So this is the index of the price of the commodities being brought by the consumer. So let's say customer A, okay, in 2000 and 2010, let me assume 2 years, okay, consumes rice and cloth. The rate for the rice in 2000 is rupees 10 per kg. For cloth, it is rupees 100 per meters. In 2010, it is rupees 15 per kg and rupees 120 per meter. Now let's say customer purchased 90 kgs of rice and 5 meters of cloth. What would be the consumer price index? For the year 2000, it would be 90 into 10 plus 5 into 100, which is 900 plus 500, 1400. For 2010, it would be 90 into 15, which is 1350 plus 5 into 12, 120, which is 600, that gives you 1950. So the consumer price index in this case would be 1950 divided by 1400 multiplied by 100, that comes somewhere approximately to 140. So the consumer price index would be somewhere around 140. Now, there is a very important difference that exists between consumer price index and GDP deflator. What and how? GDP deflator is accumulated for the goods of sales and the aggregate goods and services which are overall in the economy, since it's GDP, right? So it talks about all goods and services within the domestic market. So it does not include imported goods, right? But what would happen with consumer price index? Consumer price index does not represent all goods. It represents only the goods that one consumer is buying, and the consumer can prefer an imported good as well. So this can include imported good as well. However, GDP deflator would not include the imported goods. Another important difference. The another difference is, in the case of consumer price index, the weights are constant. However, in the case of GDP deflator, they differ according to the production at each level. So those are some of the major differences between consumer price index and GDP deflator. Coming on next, we understand GDP. So far we said the aggregate of goods and services produced within a domestic economy would be considered as part of GDP. Now, does GDP is a good indicator of the welfare of the economy? So the first thing is, it does not, rising GDP does not denote increasing welfare in the society. How? The reason is simple. Even if the GDP is rising, it can be in the hands of few. So there can be few accumulating the wealth, but a huge population being in the downtrodden state. But cumulative, we would say that yes, the GDP of the country is rising. So GDP is not a good indicator of increasing welfare. The second important thing is the non-monetary aspects. What do we include in the non-monetary aspects? Non-monetary aspects include, let's say, a consumer, females who are working for the domestic things. Let's say all the family members are going out, children going to school, husband going for a job. The female is working back, making the family productive. But that work, that domestic service is not counted under the GDP. Again, if there is any barter in the economy, if there is any exchange which is non-monetary, since it's non-monetary, there is no economy involved into it. And since there is no economy involved into it, what would happen? This would be considered as a non-monetary aspect and would not be counted towards GDP. The third important thing is, GDP does not take into account externalities. What do we mean by externalities? The benefit or the harm that a firm causes to another, for which they can be paid or they cannot be paid. I take a very simple example. Let's say there is a oil refinery. What is the purpose of the refinery? To bring in petrol, refine it, supply it. Now, there is what? The oil refinery is doing what? The oil refinery is doing value addition. The petrol is coming up. It has its own cost, but it is going as an output. There is addition of the value which is there, right? So we call this as externality, or this is basically a value addition. Now, how would externality come into play? Now, this oil refinery, when it is working, it is leading to pollution. Now, this polluting water is going into the river. When it is going into the river, it is killing the fishes. Now, once the fishes are killed, the fishermen are losing their income. Now, this was an impact, was a harm which was not thought. and nor those fishermen are being paid for it. That means this is a externality. What kind of externality? This is a negative externality. Now, GDP does not include externalities, be it the negative externality or the positive externality. The example that we had taken for the case of pollution is an example of negative externality. Now, in negative externality, GDP overestimates the actual welfare. So, whatever welfare it's causing, it would overestimate that yes, our welfare is much beyond what we are stating. But in reality, there are negative externalities associated to it. Under positive externalities, it would underestimate the welfare. Under negative externalities, it would overestimate the welfare. Clear? So we understand there can be not underestimate. Okay. So in positive, there would be underestimation of welfare. In negative externalities, there would be overestimation of welfare. And externalities are basically the benefit or the harm which is done to the another for the things they are either paid or even not paid for. So fishermen might be paid, might not be paid, but in all cases there is a harm which is done to the fishermen, right? And therefore this is an externality. So GDP, when associated to welfare, we need to understand there are three important intricacies that we must understand. So what we have broadly covered in this lecture is what is national income accounting, the various parameters like GDP, GNP, NNP. So GDP and GNP includes the net factor income from abroad. Then NNP, from the GNP you reduce the depreciation. Then we find out the national income, the personal income. Even from the personal income, we have the personal disposable income. So those are some of the things that we have discussed in this lecture. Going forward, we have talked about nominal GDP, real GDP, the ratio of nominal to real GDP, which gives you the GDP deflator. So it's simply the change in the price, which can be an indicator of the change in the GDP deflator. And then we have said that besides GDP deflator, consumer price index, wholesale price index are other important parameters that help you understand the GDP of the region or the national income accounting of the region. But GDP is not directly related to the welfare. There are three important things that we must understand here, that GDP can be accumulated in the hands of few. So it's not always that rising GDP would indicate rising welfare. There can be non-monetary aspects where barter system takes place and it's actually not economic, and then there are externalities associated to it. So that was about the national income accounting. We'll be covering further interesting topics in the next session. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful day ahead.